I'm Happy Annisa Nurhapsari. I'm from English Language Education Study major and my student number is 2152008. On this occasion, I will present my argument about the effect of using fossil fuels on climate change. Climate change refers to long-term shift in temperatures and weather patterns. This shift may be natural, such as through variation in the solar cycle, but since the 8,800s, human activities have been the main driver of climate change, primarily due to burning fossil fuels like coal, oil, and gas. I totally agree that one of the effects of climate change is the massive use of fossil fuels. Burning fossil fuels generates greenhouse gas emissions that act like a blanket wrap around the earth, trapping the sun heat and raising temperature. Example of greenhouse gas emissions that are causing climate change include carbon dioxide and methane. These come from using gasoline for driving a car or coal for heating a building. For example, clearing land and forests can also release carbon dioxide. Landfills for garbage are a major source of methane emissions. Energy, industry, transport, building, agriculture, and land use are among the main emitters. The emissions that cause climate change come from every part of the world and affect everyone, but some countries generate 3% of total emissions. 10 countries with the largest emission contribute 68%. Everyone must take climate action, but people and countries creating more of the problem have a greater responsibility to act first. The climate change is now totally evident with its causes and effects that might affect everything and can considerably a global crisis. As you countries that continue their economic growth using the unlimited fossil fuels and burn it for many purposes, and the uncontrollable human activities caused by the increasing number of world population, that means the demand of resources are needed to sustain it, and eventually with the overexploitation of natural resources that leads to environmental degradation. With these causes, climate change continues to worsening as the scientists warned us that if we continue these activities, the irreversible effect of climate change can't prevent the humans, and it will continue to be destructive natural catastrophes. Even though the problem of climate change is still arising, there are many fundamental solutions that might prevent and stop the possible irreversible effect of climate change. Many climate change solutions can deliver economic benefits while improving our lives and protecting the environment. We also have global frameworks and agreements to guide progress, such as the Sustainable Development Goals, the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, and the Paris Agreement. 3 broad categories of action are cutting emissions, adapting to climate impact, and financing required adjustments. Switching energy system for fossil fuels are to renewable like solar or wind will reduce their emission driving climate change. But we have to start right now. While a growing coalition of countries is committing to net zero emission by 2050, about half of emission cuts must be in place by 2030 to keep warming below 1.5 degrees Celsius. Fossil fuel production must decline by around 6% year between 2020 and 2030. With the 3 framework and agreements that related to environmental solutions across the globe, and many sustainable solutions presented, like instead using fossil fuels that is greatly demand for its purposes for economic growth, using renewable energy is the better key to meet the net zero emission by 2050. The Paris Agreement participated 195 countries was their agenda that all countries need to minimize using of fossil fuels. But in the case of this developing country, that all countries that actually improving their economy by using the fossil fuels is literally unfair for them. The agenda of Paris Agreement is kindly helpful and sustainable ways to prevent the climate change, but it might affect also in their economy with minimizing use of fossil fuels. The major contributor countries of carbon emission enjoyed their progressive economic growth and vast resources resulted of using fossil fuels, and they are the reason that the condition of climate change became worse. On the other hand, it might unfair for developing nations, but the purpose of attending the agreement with related to the climate change is an eye-opener not just those major contributor nations, but all nations that needs to understand the agreement and follow for the betterment of lives of the people. Still, there are many ways to upgrading the economy of a certain country with no dependency of fossil fuels. Renewable energy is the best solution since there are many advantages and it cannot harm the ecosystem. As philosophy professor Stephen Gardiner aptly explains, the challenge of climate change presents the world with several fundamental ethical dilemmas. It is simultaneously a profoundly global, intergenerational, and philosophical problem. From a global perspective, climate change presents the world with a collective action problem. All countries have collective interest in controlling global carbon emissions. But each individual country also has incentive to overconsume, in this case to emit as much carbon as necessary in response to societal demands for economic growth and prosperity. The evidence shows that burning of fossil fuels is one of the main causes of climate change. Major contributors of carbon emissions countries have a greater responsibility to minimize or lessen of using and burning fossil fuels. With demand of this for economic growth and development, many countries, especially those developing, trying to mobilize their economy to be on a developed track. Supposedly, by their aims, they can actually use fossil fuels as what major countries, USA and Europe, do. The Paris Agreement that happened in December 2015 and participated 195 nations to have an agreement to minimize using of fossil fuels and achieving its net zero emission by 2050. As climate change is now totally evident, every one of us have roles and responsibilities to prevent the possible irreversible effect of climate change. By initiating different easy fundamental solutions just like tree planting program, clean up drive, and the digital app that can save the nature, which is the ecosphere. So, based on the explanation above, I strongly agree that the use of fossil fuels greatly affects climate change. We have a hope and chance to prevent and control the effect of climate change. And lastly, we should maintain the good action and awareness to preserve the nature for the future generation. So this is my argument about the fossil fuels is effect of climate change. Thank you for attention me. See you.